Hi, I'm Ken Fossen. Today we have a question I've been asked multiple times. It invariably goes like this. I'm taking a student to participate in an activity today. I'm wondering about insurance. Am I covered? That question is very general in nature, but that's the way the question is almost always presented to the administration. I'll let you know up front that the answer is a qualified yes, but let's not just leave it at that. Rather than trying to respond to the general question, let's develop a hypothetical with more specifics. Let's imagine we have a superintendent asking the following. I had a teacher taking a student to a speech contest in Lincoln yesterday. The teacher was using her own car and was being paid mileage. Shortly before reaching her destination, the teacher was looking at the map on her smartphone and ran a red light. She hit another car driven by a mother who was taking her toddler to daycare. All of the occupants in both cars were seriously injured and were taken to the hospital. Both vehicles were totaled. Does insurance cover this? To address this question, let's first take a look at the standard mileage rate. The standard mileage rate is not directly involved here, but it often is a topic of discussion because many employees believe that the standard mileage rate only reimburses them for the cost of fuel, but not the cost of insurance. The Internal Revenue Service clarifies this matter in Internal Revenue Notice 2019-2. An independent contractor conducts an annual study for the Internal Revenue Service to determine the standard mileage rates. Items such as depreciation or lease payments, maintenance and repairs, tires, gasoline, including all taxes thereon, oil, insurance, the topic of our discussion today, and license and registration fees are included. So when the district reimburses employees for mileage using the standard mileage rate, it is, among other things, reimbursing the cost of insurance on the employee's vehicle when it is being used for school purposes. Okay, let's set the issue aside and take a look at the insurance that the teacher is likely to have on her personal auto. There will be two basic types of auto-related insurance: physical damage and liability. Automobile physical damage insurance is auto insurance coverage that insures against damage to the insured's own vehicle. Automobile liability insurance is auto insurance that protects the insured against financial loss because of legal liability for automobile-related injuries to others or damage to their property by the auto. In addition to the physical damage and liability insurance, the teacher will also likely have an umbrella liability policy to help address losses that exceed the basic limits of her auto liability insurance. An umbrella liability policy is a policy designed to provide protection against catastrophic losses. It generally is written over various primary liability policies. So here's what the teacher is likely to have for insurance on her personal vehicle. An automobile physical damage policy with, let's say, a $1,000 deductible, an automobile liability policy with, say, a $300,000 limit, and an umbrella coverage of an additional $1 million of liability coverage. The teacher may also have homeowners insurance, but that won't enter into our discussion today. It's added to the graphic just to show how the umbrella policy gets its name. It provides an umbrella of additional liability coverage over both the auto liability insurance and the homeowner's liability insurance. Now let's take a look at the district's insurance. The district will have auto physical damage insurance on its own vehicles, but the vehicle involved in our scenario is not district owned, so that coverage will not apply here. The district will likely have an auto liability policy that provides liability coverage, not property damage coverage, for not only the vehicles it owns, but for non-owned vehicles being used for district purposes. Thus, the district's auto liability coverage would extend to the teacher's vehicle as well. Like the teacher, the district will have an umbrella policy to address catastrophic liability claims. In light of that, the district's insurance picture will look something like this. The district will have physical damage insurance on its own vehicle, but that won't come into play here because the car involved belongs to the teacher. It will also have an auto liability insurance policy with, say, $1 million limit. It will then have an umbrella policy providing coverage of an additional $4 million. This results in the district having a total liability coverage of $5 million. As you will see in a moment, that $5 million figure has a rational basis and is not just a random number pulled out of the air. Okay, now let's turn our attention to the Nebraska Political Subdivisions Tort Claims Act. From your social studies classes, you may recall the discussions related to the doctrine of sovereign immunity and the doctrine of respondeat superior. The doctrine of sovereign immunity refers to the fact that the government cannot be sued without its consent. It was derived from the old British common law doctrine based on the idea that the king could do no wrong. The doctrine of sovereign immunity carried over into American law as well. However, the federal government and the states have mitigated the impact of the doctrine significantly by adopting various Tort Claims Act. These acts grant the citizens the right to sue their own government. That consent, however, is limited. Section 13902 of Nebraska law provides that no political subdivision of the state of Nebraska shall be liable for the torts of its officers, agents, or employees, except to the extent and only to the extent provided by the Political Subdivisions Tort Claims Act. So, what's a tort? A tort is an act or omission that gives rise to injury or harm to another and amounts to a civil wrong for which courts impose liability. Since a school district is not a human, the only way it can do anything is through its people. That's where the doctrine of respondeat superior enters into the picture. The doctrine of respondeat superior is a legal doctrine that holds an employer legally responsible for the wrongful acts of its employee if such act occurred while the employee was acting within the scope of his or her employment. Prior to 1987, even if an employee was clearly acting within the scope of his or her employment, Nebraska law permitted a plaintiff to sue an employee personally without going through the Tort Claims Act. In 1987, the legislature changed that. Section 13920 now provides that no suit shall be commenced against any employee of a political subdivision for money on account of damages caused by any negligent or wrongful act or omission of the employee while acting in the scope of his or her employment, unless a claim has been submitted in writing to the governing body of the political subdivision within 1 year after such claim accrued. So a claimant can no longer do an end run and bring suit against a teacher individually without bringing the school district into the issue. Additionally, since the acts of the teacher will be imputed to the school district's insurance becomes engaged as well. Now let's look at the limits placed on the claims. Section 13922 provides that the total amount recoverable against any employee for claims filed pursuant to Section 13920 shall be limited to $1 million for any person for any number of claims arising out of a single occurrence, and $5 million for all claims arising out of a single occurrence. Although this section refers to employees only, there is another section, Section 13926, which includes the political subdivision within those same recovery limits. So, since the total recovery for all claimants cannot exceed $5 million, you can see the rationale behind a school district having total liability coverage of $5 million through the combination of its auto liability coverage and its umbrella liability coverage. I don't know if all school districts in the state carry $5 million of total liability coverage, but I do know that the two larger districts I'm familiar with, as well as the school districts covered by the ALICAP program through the Nebraska School Boards Association, do have such coverage. So what happens if the claims exceed $5 million? Can the plaintiff go back against the employee personally and get more? The answer is no. Section 13909 provides that final judgment in any suit under the Political Subdivisions Tort Claims Act shall constitute a complete bar to any action by the claimant by reason of the same subject matter against the employee of the political subdivision whose act or omission gave rise to the claim. Let's now return to our hypothetical question. Here's the likely answer. The teacher's car was totaled. As a result, her auto physical damage coverage will pay her the value of the car, immediately before the crash, of course, minus the $1,000 deductible. The third parties who have claims against the teacher are the mother, the toddler, and the student riding with the teacher. The teacher's automobile liability coverage will be primary and will pay up to $300,000, which is its limit. If the losses exceed that, her umbrella policy will add up to another $1 million if needed. This brings the total available through the teacher's liability insurance to $1.3 million. Since the teacher was acting within the scope of her employment, her negligent actions would be imputed to the school district as well. Thus, if the claims exhausted the teacher's $1.3 million liability coverage, the district's non-owned auto liability coverage of $1 million would come into play, as would its $4 million umbrella liability coverage, thus making an additional $5 million of district coverage available. So there is a total of $6.3 million of coverage available. Since the Tort Claims Act limits the total recovery for all claims to no more than $5 million, there is ample insurance coverage available in our hypothetical. Before leaving this topic, I need to leave you with 3 caveats that will explain why I said in the beginning that the answer is a qualified yes. First, independent contractors are not employees of a school district. A referee for a football game on Friday night is not an employee of the home team, even though the visiting team may accuse him of such. Since he is not an employee, he does not benefit from the district's liability insurance nor the protections of the Tort Claims Act. Second, a school employee may lose his status as an employee if he strays too far from his scope of employment with the district. For example, if an administrator leaves extra early to travel to an educational conference so he can get in a round of golf with some relatives the day before the conference starts, has he stepped outside of his scope of employment with the district? Maybe. If so, he too would not receive the benefits of the district's liability insurance or the protections of the Tort Claims Act. Finally, the Nebraska Political Subdivisions Tort Claims Act is specific to Nebraska. It is not the governing law in Kansas, Wyoming, South Dakota, or any other state. So don't rely on it when traveling outside of the state of Nebraska. I hope this has been beneficial. As always, thanks for watching.